And the countdown begins. It is tough to silence an Adelaide Oval crowd, and even tougher during a crunch final. But that is exactly what the boys from out in the western suburbs of Melbourne did tonight, and they really put in a brilliant performance for Adelaide, well and truly sending Port Adelaide to the doghouse. The Dogs, they were on from the start. They never looked like losing, and the final score was Port Adelaide 6-9, 45 to the Western Bulldogs 17-14, 126 and 81 point win for the Western Bulldogs, meaning after 206 games throughout this AFL season and some shaky moments we've seen, ended up in the grand final of the two teams that were on top of the ladder for 2/3 of the season, and I am so excited for it. I'm so excited for this live stream. My name is Harper. With me, as always, on the post-game live stream, Connor Payne. How are you feeling, Connor?
I'm feeling good. Obviously, not the most exciting of games in the second half there, with the game pretty much well and truly done at halftime. But again, just another awesome display from the Bulldogs to back up Melbourne's last night, and it sets up what should be a really tantalising clash not next week, in 2 weeks rather, between the Demons and the Dogs in the grand final.
Yes, tantalising indeed, and I believe my video's a bit choppy for all the people watching in the audience. Apologies for that. I'm running a lot of applications on my internet at the moment, so not much I can do to fix that at the moment. But I hope you can carry on continuing tuning in and sending your questions and comments if you'd like to. Dogs fans, tell us how you're feeling. If there are any Port fans tuning in, tell us how you're feeling as well. D's fans, Cats fans even, from last night's prelim, let us know how you are feeling. What we do usually, though, the traditional way we kick off the show is we talk about our best from each side. You've been pretty lucky, I've got to say, in the few games we've done this. You've had the winning team pretty much every time. So that's been a good job for you to have, and you've got the exact same job this time. Who was your best for the Western Bulldogs, Connor?
I mean, it's easy to pick the best when I pick the winning teams, as I've been 2 for 2 over the last 2 nights. So I'm not going to be bragging about my tips at the moment, but I did pick 2 winners from 2, so props to me there. But on to more important things. The best for the Bulldogs, obviously Jack Macrae. I think he had almost 38 touches. Was just immense from the midfield. You could argue Bailey Smith, who I also had in the best with his 4 goals, maybe pipped him rather because of his impact on the scoreboard. But I would give the edge to Macrae, even though Smith did finish with those 4 majors. Also had Aaron Norton. He was on from the first bounce, really. He's just controlling the air all around the ground, but especially in the forward half of the Bulldogs, and did hit the scoreboard as well. Jason Johannesson, obviously, in the last few games against the Bombers, rather, and the Brisbane Lions, he was the super sub, but due to the injury of Cody Waitman, rather, he came in full-time and started and played really well, and he's locked in definitely for next week, starting, if not as the Medi sub again. And then my final one was Adam Treloar. Obviously, during the week, a lot of talk from the media about his few past recent performances is quite poor, I think, against the Brisbane Lions. Got a bit of the ball against the Bombers, but I don't think he had quite the impact that he normally would have in past games, but answered all these critics tonight, and he was just immense. And I think it was the second quarter, he was a part of the best play of the game, where he took 5 running bounces on the far wing, bombed it in brilliantly to just on top of the goal square. It was knocked down by Shaki before Jason Johannesson grabbed it and kicked another goal for the Bulldogs there. So, yeah, those 5 players were in the best, but you'd be hard-pressed to leave anybody out for the Bulldogs. That's just how good they were tonight.
Yeah, they were very, very good, as were the D's last night. 2, not the greatest kind of contests we've seen in preliminary final history over the course of this weekend. And, yes, like I said before, I had the unfortunate task of picking the Cats best last night, and this week again I've got the unfortunate task of picking Port Adelaide best. We have got some questions and comments coming through on the Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you haven't put one through, or if you have put one through, keep them coming through. We'd love to read them out and respond to them all because we love chatting footy here. But I'll get to the Port Adelaide best, like I promised. Yeah, not many to choose from here, but I thought Travis Boak, he was all right. As always, his kind of consistent self, getting in and around the contest, getting a few disposals. I think he got, I'll have a look at the stat here, but I think he might have tipped over 30, got around 30, something like that. I thought Bonner was very good. He got a PB in terms of disposals. Not sure what he got in the end, but it was definitely over his previous best of 31. Most of them on the kind of outside. That's the kind of player he is. Oh, okay, he got 32 in the end, and Travis Boak got 24. But yeah, those guys were all right. And the guy I missed in between Bonner and Boak there, Scott Lysette, got a fair few tap outs. They didn't eventuate into much in terms of clearances, but I mean, he did what he could in terms of the tap outs. Not sure how many of those were to advantage. Not an awful lot.
It was only 6, they said at the end. I'm pretty sure. I think it was 6-5 with a couple of minutes to go in the last quarter. So although he got a lot of hit outs, not many were to advantage, and only, I think, one more in the end over the Bulldogs Rockman.
Yeah, I don't think any of these guys were in the top 10 best on ground in terms of both teams. Not even close to it, really. But there's my Port best, and Ollie Wines was my best on ground for Port. 38 touches, as always, just an absolute bull around the ball. Great player to watch for me. Really, really, really enjoy watching Ollie Wines, and could be in for a shot at the Brownlow in, 8 days time from now. Looking forward to seeing that one. Anyone you think I might have missed out on there for Port Adelaide?
No, I think that probably about covers it. I thought, as you mentioned, Bonner was probably their best or second best behind Wines. Obviously, Wines got a heap of the ball and tried his heart out. I think his effort and consistency across the 4 quarters, although he may not have had the impact that he normally does, his effort couldn't be questioned. And Bonner obviously got a lot of it as well, as we both said. And then you mentioned Travis Boak, their past captain, tried hard, but just couldn't get into the flow of the game. And I think a play that summed up his day, although he tried hard, I think it was midway through the 4th quarter, he had it against Bailey Williams, tried to dodge him 3 or 4 times, and then was just eventually tackled over the line. And I think that just summed up Port's day, and I think it summed up his day. Just not quite there when they needed to be, and the Bulldogs were just too good. So yeah, tried his best, as he always does, but yeah, just not quite good enough.
Yeah, I'll get your Bulldogs best back up just for a sec now, and I will mention a guy who I would have 100% been in my best for the Bulldogs, Mish Hannon. I thought he was absolutely awesome tonight. He is so underrated for me, and he's the commentators, I thought, I finally latched onto a bit tonight. His movement and his work up and down the ground, up and down those wings and half forward flank especially. He's just an awesome player for me. I think he kicked 3 goals in the end, all in the first half. Great little kind of bit of movement and turn to hit up Aaron Norton in the goal square for a nice goal assist in that 2nd quarter as well. Thought he was absolutely superb. I'll rave about him a bit later on in the program, but we should get into our quarter-by-quarter analysis. Obviously not too much to talk about for a lot of the game, but we will do it nonetheless. The first 2 quarters, there was a bit going on there. So do you want to tell us your take on the first quarter first up?
I mean, all you can really talk about is the Bulldogs. They started so well, jumped out of the box with a goal in the opening minute to Bailey Smith. Obviously read the play really well. I think it was Shaki who knocked the ball down to the ground, and then obviously Bailey Smith grabbed it and kicked a snap goal, and that just set the tone for the Bulldogs. And from that moment onwards, from that goal onwards, they couldn't be stopped really. There's no point over the 4 quarters where you ever thought they were in danger. Even when Port got that run on in the 3rd quarter, that first goal just set the tone, as I mentioned. So from there, they just kept growing and growing, and they ended up kicking the 7 goals to 1 in that first quarter. All across the ground, they were just elite. Their pressure at the contest and ability to win the ball, especially in the middle and especially at stoppages, they were just tremendous. And it seemed, especially in that first quarter, anytime the ball went into the forward 50, that looked like they were going to score every time. So Port Adelaide almost did a good job in holding them to 7 goals to Port Adelaide's 1, because as I said, just anytime the ball got anywhere near the 50, the Bulldogs looked on and looked like they'd kick goals at any given time, rather. Norton and Mitch Hannon, as you mentioned there, were probably the standouts for me in that first quarter. Obviously, there was players across the board who were really good for the Bulldogs, but Norton and Hannon were just tremendous. Norton taking multiple contested marks, roaming the air in the forward 50 as well, and Hannon's pressure in the forward 50 and creating those loose ball gets and creating those crumbing goals was just tremendous and continued through the 4 quarters, but it was really set up by those two in the first quarter. Shaki was really good. He had a really good game overall, but I liked what he did in the first half, especially putting a body rather on Aliir, not allowing him to roam the free space, roam the skies and be that third man up and take the uncontested marks as he so likes to do. That sort of become an All-Australian centre-half back. But Shaki in particular was one of those players tonight who helped put Aliir off his game and made him look second-rate. So if you had looked at just tonight, you wouldn't have thought that Aliir was the All-Australian centre-half back, and that just goes to show the job that Shaki did, especially in that first quarter. When Port did get a bit of a run on, it was due to them winning the ball out of the middle. But again, the Bulldogs' pressure was just immense. Obviously, their midfield pressure is led by Tom Liberatore. I couldn't remember his name. There it is, Tom Liberatore.
Right.
Yeah, he's just his pressure around the ground, but especially obviously at the contests, at the stoppages, you can't say enough how good he is creating that pressure and getting the ball into Bulldogs' hands. And I thought he was really good in the first quarter. And then again, Bailey Smith, he kicked another one in the second quarter. They had 5 goals in the first 9 minutes and didn't really let off for that first quarter. And obviously, as I mentioned, they finished with the 7, but yeah, they were just immense from the opening siren to the closing siren in the first quarter. They just couldn't be stopped.
Yeah. Could not be stopped, to say the absolute least. They kicked the first 5 goals of the game. The Dogs, the Port Adelaide got one back, but then I thought those last 2 goals in the final 90 seconds or so of that first quarter to the Bulldogs, Hannon kicked them, and the other one I haven't got. Bailey Smith and Hannon. They were the 2 goal kickers at the end of that quarter. I thought they were 2 crucial goals, got them out to a 37-point lead at quarter time. I thought Stephen Motlop was really, Ken Hinkley wouldn't be too happy with him for his kind of part in those 2 goals. He had a bit of a fumble leading up to that first goal, and the second goal, he kind of just got stuck in no man's land, left his man, Adam Treloar, in the back 50, who handballed it off to Hannon, and Hannon kicked a goal with about 5 seconds to go, and 37 points up at quarter time. That is, I mean, you've seen teams come back from that, but it's so hard. You could almost say it was game over then. Some stats that I took note of throughout that quarter, which I thought were very, very interesting. I thought this whole quarter was quite interesting to analyse. There was a whole lot of different stuff going on, but halfway through the quarter, when the Dogs were 5 goals up, it was 25 disposals to Port and 59 disposals for the Bulldogs. And with that stat, you'd expect Port to have way more tackles, obviously not having much of the ball, but Port were only winning the tackles 12-11. So it really highlights the Bulldogs' pressure and the Port Adelaide players' lack of pressure. I thought their tackles, for so much that first half of that first quarter especially, was so weak, just not strong in the tackle at all. Just saw broken tackles all over the place, and Bulldogs could slip through, and that's why they were winning so much contested ball and so many contests. As well, I mentioned Scott Lysette, who managed to find himself in my best for Port Adelaide, 14-6 in the hit-outs at quarter time in the favour of the Power, but 15-6 clearances in the favour of the Bulldogs. So Scott Lysette maybe winning the taps along with Peter Adams, but really the midfield not really doing much to give much service to the forwards for the Power. And stoppage clearances 3-12 in the Bulldogs' favour, 25-48 contested possessions in the Bulldogs' favour, 2-8 contested marks. And something else that I noticed for the Bulldogs, they've got this star-studded midfield, and really showed with the people who were getting the clearances. They had 10 clearances, 10 clearances at a point in that first quarter that I noted, and there was a really great spread. 15 clearances they had, 10 different players. Daniel, McRae, Liberatore, Treloar, Dunkley, Bailey Smith, Stephen Martin, Tim English, Lockie Hunter, and Bailey Dell. So an awesome spread, and it's so hard to stop when you've got so many players able to burst out of packs and get great clearance balls around the contest like that. And it was an awesome, exhilarating first quarter to watch. If you're a Bulldogs fan, if you're a neutral fan, really, I reckon, which I am and you are, it was great to watch the Bulldogs play in that first quarter. And the second quarter, they didn't stop there, did they?
No, you're exactly right. One player I do want to highlight on their first quarter performance is Josh Dunkley. He didn't feature in their best. I think he dropped off slightly in the third and fourth quarters, but a bit understandable when they were 58 points up at halftime. I thought in the first quarter especially, his pressure and just drive at the contest was just immense. He would have been easily one of those players, 15 players to get a clearance in that first quarter. And just to see him back at his best is really good. Obviously, we're both Essendon fans. He's been linked with us in the past, but he is a genuinely good player to watch from an opposition team. And he showed why in that first half he was so valued after last season, the 2020 season, when he had a really good year.
Yeah, he did have a very good year indeed. And maybe while we're going through this quarter by quarter analysis, I'll save some of these comments for a bit later on. But if you have got any comments, get them through to us on the chat of wherever you are tuning into the show, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you may be. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else at all that you noticed from that second quarter?
Second quarter, I think it was just much of the same, really. Obviously, Port, I think, slowed it up a little bit through the middle of the ground. The Bulldogs, it wasn't all on their terms for most of the quarter, but again, pushing the lead out to 58 points at halftime is just, to go from 37 is one thing after one quarter, but to push it to 58 at halftime is just incredible. I saw a stat at halftime from the resident AFL stats king, Sir Swamp Thing, that the biggest lead that any team had come from behind in any game in VFL AFL history was 52 points, and the Dogs led by 58 points. So I think most Dogs fans, although I saw a bit of talk on Twitter that even with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, there was still Dogs fans still nervous. I think at halftime you would have been well within your rights, putting the cue in the rack and celebrating the arrival into the grand final, because there was no way Port Adelaide were going to come back. Obviously, you thought they would kick a few goals, have a bit of a run as games tend to go, but there was no way they were going to be coming back from such a big deficit at halftime.
Yeah, no way at all. I think the biggest comeback in a prelim, or Essendon were 42 points down to Adelaide at, I think it was halftime of the prelim in 93, ended up winning that game famously, of course, and 58 points is just at a whole nother level, really. So if it wasn't game over at quarter time, it was most certainly game over at halftime, even though some Dogs fans may have been a bit nervous, as all footy fans are well within their rights to be in any final situation, really. But some notes I took from the second quarter, I thought Darcy Byrne, look, I don't want to throw people under the bus too much, but I thought Darcy Byrne-Jones had an absolute stinker of a quarter and a game. Really fumbles all over the place, misreads all over the place. Really wasn't having his greatest game of all time. The same could be said of many Port Adelaide players, but he was one in particular that I noticed. I put a little tweet up on the Where page about Mitch Hannon's game. Halfway through the second quarter, he'd got himself 3 goals, a goal assist, which I mentioned before, that lovely little run around and kick to the top of the goal square to Aaron Norton, who kicked the goal from top of the square. 7 disposals, which were all kicks, and all but one were effective. 2 contested marks for Mitch Hannon halfway through that second quarter, and he was just working so hard, running all over the place. I think he's been an awesome pickup for the Bulldogs. It's going to be great to see him compete against his old team, the D's, next week. And yeah, it was more of the same, really. Absolute demolition from the Bulldogs, inflicting it onto the Port Adelaide players around the ball. It was there was no contest in the contest, really. They were absolutely smashing it. And Laddams and Lysette, they had 0 marks at halftime between them. When neither of you ruckmen have taken a mark at halftime, it's not really a good sign for having any control over the game whatsoever, and that was evident just with a bit of an eye test, really. The Port Adelaide were all over the place. We will move into the third quarter for a bit. As you said, the score at halftime was 3 goals, 4-22 to Port Adelaide, and 12 goals, 8-80 to the Bulldogs. 58 points up the Dogs. quick few words on the second half, and do you want to start with the third quarter?
Yeah, no worries. Obviously, as we mentioned, Port did get a bit of a run on at the start of that third quarter. Dixon got the first goal of the quarter and had his first impact of the game, although he did finish with 2 in the end. Again, I thought he was very, very poor. I mentioned it in last night's mini preview after the Geelong-Melbourne game that they were going to need him to fire, but I didn't hold great hopes for that. And again, it showed why he was very poor. His last half of the season this year is very poor, and I think if it wasn't for his past performance, I think he would have been dropped once or twice, because on the form he showed in the second half of this year, and especially the last 2 weeks, he's been very, very poor.
Who was playing on Charlie Dixon for most of that game, by the way? Did you take note of that? Was it Zane Cordy, or I didn't particularly notice?
I think it was a bit of Zane Cordy. I think it was just floating, really. Zane Cordy was the main one.
Yeah.
I think that was just the main matchup size-wise. They were suited best, but I think it was a bit of whoever was closest. But I think if all things being equal, I think it was Zane Cordy that held him fairly well. Although he did get loose a couple of times. I think that was more of a communication issue rather than Dixon just out-muscling or outworking a player. And yeah, as I mentioned, I just think without Mitch Georgiades, who's come on leaps and bounds in his first 2 years as an AFL player, without Dixon firing, Port Adelaide never really stood a chance, let alone with 15, 16 other blokes putting in poor performances. So yeah, as I mentioned, he got the first goal of the third quarter, and then Todd Marshall kicked the next one, so that made it 2 in 4 minutes. Todd Marshall, another player that I thought had a really poor performance, ended up getting subbed, I think, with a hamstring complaint. Looked like he'd kicked a third in a row for Port Adelaide, but replay showed it was touched by Marcus Bontempelli on the line, which it would have been interesting to see had that gone through and not been touched, if that changes the game at all. I still think the Bulldogs do win comfortably, but it just would have been a wrinkle to throw in there. Maybe they get another goal or two and start putting the doubt into the Bulldogs' minds. But after that the goal decision was turned over, the game sort of went to a bit of a scrap. No team could really take control. It was a bit of both teams negating the other between the arcs, and the ball was just being moved side to side by both teams. The Port Adelaide fans finally found their voice. They were pretty quiet in that first half for obvious reasons. They started to get to let loose with the boos, sometimes warranted, most often not. As most Port Adelaide fans and fans in general like to do at footy games, when the umpiring in the game isn't going their way, even though I think the umpiring was definitely in the Port Adelaide favour, rather. Bulldogs left it late to kick their first goal in the third quarter. I think it was Josh Shackey kicked their goal with 3 minutes to go in the third quarter. But then again, Adam Treloar showing his class that he had been missing, I think, through these first two finals. But
if anyone is... I don't know if you can hear me. Hopefully you can hear me. I'll give a little message to Connor in the chat. We had a very similar issue last night as well. There we go. The message is sent. He's doing a little reload there. Oh, Connor, he's back. What were you saying?
Can you hear me?
I don't know whose end that was. Yeah, I can hear you. I think that might be my end, to be honest.
It never went out for me, so I was just waffling on about the Bulldogs kicking their first goal of the quarter. From Josh Shackey with 3 minutes to go. Oh, so yeah, you didn't miss much then. Josh Shackey kicked that goal, and then Adam Treloar showed his class that I feel like he'd been missing through the first two finals. A bit of unwarranted chat through the week. I think a little bit of it was fair, given he hadn't been up to his usual standards. But a bit went over the top, and then a beautiful running goal, running into 50 to cap off the Bulldogs' third quarter, and they were well and truly home and hosed after 3 quarters there.
Yeah, well and truly home and hosed, and the score at 3/4 time. The margin was exactly the same. It was 2 goals for each in that quarter. So it was 5 goals, 8-38 to Port Adelaide, and 14-12, 96 to the Bulldogs. And the Bulldogs only extended that lead in the fourth quarter. As I said before, final score 6 goals, 9-45 to 17-14, 126. Don't think the last quarter don't think there's too much that's worth talking about there. Bailey Smith kicked a very nice goal from about 55 out that looked like it travelled about 60 or 65 and looked absolutely effortless. It was a very, very nice goal. Would have got the crowd going absolutely ballistic, especially if it was in Melbourne and it was a close game. Vandermeer had a tight hammy for the Bulldogs, so he got subbed out for Anthony Scott. So it'll be interesting to see how old Vandermeer pulls up, the saviour in the last week's game against the Lions, of course, kicking that crucial point. Be interesting to see how he pulls up for a fortnight's time against the Demons. That's about all I've got for the last quarter. Anything quick you want to say on the last quarter before we go into some more broad chat about both of these two teams in the grand final?
No, not really. I think everything that needed to be said was said there. I think the most disappointing thing for Port Adelaide, mainly in that third quarter, was they were probably the better team for if you had to choose out of the two. Obviously, they got the first 2 goals in the second quarter, in the third quarter there, and for the first 5 or 10 minutes in that third quarter, they were probably on top, but they just couldn't convert. So to go down to kick the first 2 goals of the quarter and still be down by 58 points at 3/4 time would have been really disappointing to Ken Hinkley and his staff and all the players, obviously. So, and then that just continued. You could tell that Port Adelaide were pretty disappointed and had put the cue in the rack, and the Bulldogs just kept attacking, and then ended up running out. I think it was 81-point winners, which it felt like a completely different domination to Melbourne game in a sense that I think Melbourne was just a class above Geelong yesterday, whereas I think the Bulldogs just outworked and outpressured and outmuscled Port Adelaide tonight. Not to say that Western Bulldogs rather weren't impressive. I just think it was 2 different 80-point wins, if that can even be possible. But yeah, all that needs to be said about their fourth quarter is the Dogs ended up running out by the 81 points there.
I really enjoy watching the Bulldogs when they get their pressure game going, and it just works like absolute clockwork. It's almost unmatched in teams this year and teams in recent memory for me. Like, one player kind of sets that press off, and then everyone else just knows what to do, when to do it in terms of that pressure game. And like I said, works like clockwork. Their pressure game is absolutely outstanding when they are on. But let's get into a bit more of a broad conversation. We'll talk about the Dogs a bit later, leading into a grand final preview, which will be very, very exciting. But first, I want to talk about Port Adelaide. What's next for Port Adelaide? I've got the question up here, question I prepared earlier. What is next for Port Adelaide? Where do they go from here? Review of their season. We've got a comment actually from Helen Jones, which I'll get back up. Where were Port tonight? Good all year, then complete capitulation tonight. What happened?
It's hard to say, really, because I don't think they had the best year. Obviously, they did finish, I think it was the regular season, with 6 straight wins, and then they completely dominated Geelong. But after Melbourne's performance last night, maybe that was more of a symptom of Geelong being poor and not being able to deal with the pressure than Port Adelaide being that good. Obviously, you still have to do it in the end. So Port Adelaide did well in that qualifying final to bring the pressure and completely dominate Geelong. But personally, for me, I was never satisfied. May not be the right word, but I was never in awe of Port Adelaide and the pressure and the game that they brought. I think they were too up and down at times, even though they were banking the wins. They were just too up and down in their form, especially against when you compared them to the top 8 teams to the bottom 10. They were too up and down in their form, and I think what's next? Charlie Dixon. It's a weird one. I mentioned it before, but he's going to want to regain his form, because if not, I can see him on the outer rather than in the starting 22 or as a medical sub. He had a pretty poor second half of the year, and I think with Mitch Georgiades' emergence, I think he can take that number 1 forward role, and hopefully for them, Todd Marshall can continue to develop. Although he didn't have a great game tonight, they'd want him to be that sort of second or third tall. So if they're to compete again, they're going to need Dixon, I think, to be fit and firing, and to put this poor form behind him. But it's a weird one, because from last year's prelim to this year's, I think they lost an average of like 800 days or 3 years or something on the average age from last year's prelim team to this year. There was something ridiculous like that. I can't quite remember the stat. So they are in good stead, because they do have such a young list who are all really, really talented. And they'll only continue to grow. But They just do need to plug a few holes. I think for them, they're probably the most key area to address would probably be a key defender. Obviously, getting Lear was huge, and we saw during the season and against Geelong in the qualifying final how good he can be, but he was completely shut down tonight and shut out by the Bulldogs. So I think if they can get a lockdown key defender that can take an opposition's best forward, that will do them wonders, and it'll allow
Not happy with Tom Jonas or someone like him?
No, I just think not quite good enough and not quite big enough. Obviously, comparing anybody to Stephen May and Jake Lever is a big comparison, but I think Lever and Aliir are pretty much on level pegging. You could put one above the other however you wanted. But if they can get a guy that can have Stephen May's impact or close to it, obviously getting a Stephen May type player is pretty hard to do. But if they can get just somebody close to that level, which allows those two, allow Aliir and whoever that key defensive player is to play off each other, I just think will be so important and allow them to actually attack an opposition forward, especially in these big finals as we saw tonight.
Yeah, do agree with you there. And all season, I think in a way you could say that they were quite consistent. They beat the teams below them. They couldn't beat the teams above them until the kind of latter stages of the year where they beat the Bulldogs in round 23 and then Geelong in the first week of the finals. But then when push came to shove and they were in the biggest game since that prelim against Richmond last year, they just were completely outclassed by the Bulldogs by 71 points, as we've said. I think I might have accidentally said 81 points earlier on, but it was 71 points. 71-point loss to the Bulldogs. And what was I going to say? Talking about their list. So, you're not too happy with their back line. Is there any particular player that you'd be kind of eyeing off if you were the Port Adelaide recruiting team?
It's hard to say because I think most players that are that good or the quality that Port Adelaide need would be under contract. Yeah. I guess you'd have to sort of go bargain hunting and find a hidden gem almost. A player, I mean, as an example, Brandon Zerk-Thatcher is considered a key back, but he wouldn't be good enough for Port Adelaide at this stage. I can't really think of anybody really off the top of my head that's on the fringes or could look for a move to Port Adelaide and would help shore them up almost immediately. It's a very hard one, and maybe a draft is the best option, or a consolidate a trade with a young player and a pick to go get a really good key defender. But again, it's so hard to go and get a player of that quality, given how few there are in the AFL, and especially seeing how Stephen May and Jake Lever have gone this year. Their importance has just grown and grown. So I think it'll be pretty tough for them to just go out and get a player. And if they do look to the draft to do that, it's going to take a few years for them to develop because, as everybody knows, key position players, but especially key defenders, especially if they do play that fullback role, they take a few years to develop.
Yeah, they definitely do. I'm having a look at Brandon Zerk-Thatcher now. Of course, Essendon player, for those who don't know. He's 23 years old, but he is out of contract, I believe, and he is from South Australia. So, I mean, he's only going to improve, 23-year-old.
They look at Aaron Francis.
Aaron Francis. I think he's got a few more years on his contract, doesn't he?
I believe so, but I think, again, from obviously we've seen him plenty of times for Essendon, he's more of a centre half-back, a floating defender rather than that number one key defender that you sort of need to shut down guys. He can do it on occasion, but I think his game is much more suited to taking those marks from the side or in space and then using the ball by foot rather than shutting down an opposition key defender. He has the size, I think, to be that kind of defender, but too many times you see him get outworked, and I just don't think that's his natural game and natural position.
Yeah, he's been destroyed many times by the big power forwards, your Tom Hawkins, your Charlie Dixons even, who we were talking about before. Port Adelaide, having a look at their list now, they don't have too many players, too many key players in the 30-plus age bracket. They've got Stephen Motlop, who I thought didn't have a great game tonight at all and is not a player that is kind of going to rip up the club's going to be in tatters if they lose him. They've got Tom Jonas, who's the captain, of course, Charlie Dixon, Hamish Hartlett, who's played 10 games this year, Tom Rockcliffe, I think he's retired. Travis Boak has been smashing it. Robbie Gray, he's 33, but he can turn it on when he gets on his game. And Tyson Goldsack on the rookie list, which I had no idea about. He hasn't played a game. But yeah, they really have got a lot of players kind of in their prime. Ollie Wines, 26, Alir, 26, Carl Amon, who's very underrated for me, 25. Your Scott Lysette is 28. And then all those young players, your Todd Marshall, Willem Drew, Peter Laddams, Sam Powell-Pepper, Houston, Bonner, Burn Jones, Rosie, Butters, Dersma, Georgiades. I think their list is looking in very good shape. And unlike the other team that lost in this preliminary final week, they could be challenging for many, many years to come. Anything else you want to say about Port before we move on to a bit of Bulldogs chat and grand final chat?
No, not really. But as you mentioned it before, Stephen Motlop had a pretty poor game. I think him and Orazio, and with about 2 minutes to go in the second quarter, they both each only had 2 touches. And compared to how both of them played against Geelong, Orazio obviously finished with the 4 goals, and Motlop got a bit of the ball and was influential when he had it. And I just think that's another example of the difference between the qualifying final game and then tonight's game. Those two had next to no impact. And obviously Orazio only had, I think, the 1 shot at goal. And that was just emblematic of Port Adelaide's night as a whole. Just key players from the match against Geelong, the win against Geelong, just had little to zero impact against the Dogs tonight.
Yeah, definitely did. Orazio Fantasia, geez, he's been a great kind of enigma in within the league and within Port Adelaide's system throughout this year, and most of his career really plagued by injuries. This year, when he's been on, he's kicked 4 goals in games sometimes. I think he kicked maybe 5 on debut against the Roos or something like that. But he's just injured so much, isn't he? And then sometimes it take a while to bounce back fully from injuries, and we won't see him get up to that good level till a few weeks into his return. But do you reckon it's time to talk a bit about the Bulldogs, Connor?
Definitely. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. I'll throw it over to you first. What did you make of, we've talked about we've deconstructed their 4-quarter performance, but what are they going to be looking at in terms of, how are they going to try to manipulate Melbourne and attack their weaknesses heading into a fortnight's time in that big grand final on Saturday?
Obviously, as you know, I've mentioned on, I think, multiple live streams now, I was pretty bullish on the Bulldogs this year, especially seeing them get their mojo back against Essendon in that elimination final. And on the back of tonight, I think if they can bring that pressure and that heat, although we saw Melbourne did do that last night, I do think the Bulldogs are just a little bit better than Melbourne at that. They've got guys like Liberatore, who's just the heart and soul of that team. Jack McRae, he's probably arguably the best ball winner in the AFL at the moment. He broke the record for most disposals in a VFL AFL season, passing Tom Mitchell's 2018 season, which I think was a Brownlow medal winning season, which is just incredible. Obviously, I think McRae had a few more games with finals now, but still, what an incredible achievement to break the all-time disposals record for a season. And then guys like Bontempelli is just the cream of the crop, rather. Obviously, I think he ended up with about 21, 22 touches, so he didn't quite get as much of the ball as he usually does, but didn't show pretty much any ill effect of that knee injury. And heading into next week, I think if they can play as they did tonight, which is a big ask against Melbourne's midfield, led by Petrarca and Clayton Oliver, if they can have the same impact and bring the heat, that's going to go a long way. But another interesting battle, as I mentioned, for tonight's game last night, will just again be those key position battles. How will Aaron Norton go against Stephen May with Jake Lever roaming? Obviously, Cody Waitman, you'd think will come back, which will be a big in. And obviously, the form of Mitch Hannon, your favourite Bulldog, will be much needed. If you can back up tonight's performance, that'll put them in good stead. And then again, in the back line, I don't think Melbourne's forward line is good, but I think a lot of it is relied upon their midfielders, so that they can negate Ben Brown and Bailey Fritsch, who I'd say they're probably 2 focal points, and obviously Cozzy Pickett, but he's more of that small forward rather than the lead-up type. They can shut down Fritsch and Ben Brown and stop the Melbourne midfielders of Petrarca and Oliver pushing forward, and guys like James Harmes, they can stop those guys pushing forward and putting goals on the board. It'll push the Bulldogs in a long way to taking the Premiership Cup for 2021.
Yeah, and Michael James has told us on Twitter, Port Adelaide, the Gary Rowan of football team, soft as butter in big games. Interesting comment from Michael there. And we've got an interesting question from someone on Instagram, Art for Gaza on Instagram. Send us a question. She's got a few here, but the one that I'm most interested in, has the Dogs underdog tag helped them? Hard to answer, but interesting conversation to have.
I mean, it's one of those things. Does an underdog tag really mean anything? I think at this point of the season, most teams don't really need much external push or pressure put on them, or roles, whatever you want to call it, because it is a prelim final. Everybody knows what you're playing for. You're playing for a spot in the grand final, even back to last week or against Essendon 2 weeks ago. Obviously, a bit of that underdog role might help a little bit, but I think more so that would apply in the regular season. I think, as I said, in the finals, you don't really need much to be getting up and about. They might have been a bit pissed off, especially with the events of this week. They were unable to train, only able to go for a captain's run at Adelaide Oval, rather, due to the politics and bureaucrats, which is a bit. We'll leave that for a discussion for another day, because it's just stupidity,
politics podcast,
to say the least.
Yeah,
that's coming next year. But no, just to say the least, it's quite stupid. All of the drama that went on this week, and I think may continue next week. I think they're going to have to do another week of only allowed to train and have to quarantine when they arrive in Perth, which is just outrageous. But that's the world and times we live in at the moment. So they'll no doubt talk about it during the week and the following week as we enter the grand final week. But they'll know what they're playing for, and ultimately that is to hold up the Premiership Cup in 2 weeks against Melbourne.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in at the moment to Pesting a Pain Politics. Glad to have you here. If you've got any questions, comments, anything like that, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you've just recently tuned in, let us know whatever we're talking about, or if you want to help us drive the conversation onto a whole different topic, put something in the comments of wherever you are tuning in, and we'll read it out, respond to it, and chat about it. And you can join in the conversation wherever you are tuning in. But with the Bulldogs, I do agree with you. It's almost like, can you call them underdogs? I know you tipped them in this game. Lots of people tipped them in this game. They were top two for most of the year, for 2/3 of the year. Them and Melbourne are in the top two, so they know they're good enough. I don't think they're going into the many games, if any games, with a mentality of like, we've got to knock over these big boys. They can feel they can match it with any team, and we know that they can match it with any team from their results all season, because they've beaten big teams. They've beaten Melbourne. They've beaten they beat Port at Adelaide Oval earlier in the season as well. Heaps more that I probably can't remember at the moment. Smashed Essendon in that final, of course, as well, which we won't talk about because it's not a topic that we want to. We don't want our heart.
It's funny. We always end up talking about it, and then we all also say we shouldn't talk about it. So.
We do, yeah. We always just come drawn back to talk about ourselves and talk about our own team, but we won't do that. We'll refrain from feeling sorry for ourselves and our poor Bomber hearts. Sorry about that. And if I am choppy for anyone that is tuning in, apologies for that. My internet is going quite slow at the moment because I'm streaming this on all these different platforms. But early tip for this grand final. Who are you going with?
Early tip. My head says Melbourne. I think they're just a little bit better. But my heart, and I think the key position, especially the key defense in Lever and May, I think is just incredible and gives them the edge. But my heart does say Bulldogs. So can I call a draw, or is that too on the fence?
Well, as we know, the draw doesn't go to a replay anymore. It goes to extra time. So we'll have to see a result on the day, and we'll have to see a tip tonight from you, Connor.
Right now for my tip, I will go Bulldogs by 4 points, but I'm not strung to that or beholden by that. But by tomorrow, I may pick Melbourne. By the next day, I may pick the Bulldogs again. So, yeah, Bulldogs by 4 points at the moment, but I guess we'll wait and see how Cody Waitman turns up, see how Stephen May turns up, and Bontempelli and Leighton Vandermeer as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Did you tip the Bulldogs by 4 tonight as well? Is that you?
I think it was 12, maybe 4. I'm not too sure. I know. I got the tip right, so that's all that matters.
I know. I think I did Port by 3. Lockie did Bulldogs by 2. I think you might have done Bulldogs by 4. But
I'm being told by Dalton, the executive producer, that I did tip by 4 points. So you were correct.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, you spoke about Cody Waitman before in passing. Obviously, he has to come back into this side. He's such an important player, despite his tender years. Does he come straight back in for Anthony Scott, who was the man to replace him this week, or is there another player that might be feeling a bit of pressure, perhaps in a small forward role, or perhaps in a different role entirely?
You'd probably think that's going to be the move. You'd think, depending on how Leighton Vandermeer gets up, he obviously was subbed out, but I think with the 2-week break, it is the 2-week break, you'd think he'd probably be right to go. The only guy that I can really think of that may be under a bit of pressure would be Rock Smith. He did end up kicking a goal, but I thought most of the time he got the ball, he was pretty poor decision-making wise. Always seemed to choose the wrong option out of the right one and the wrong one. He always seemed to go the wrong one. But he has shown in flashes in the past that he can do good things for the Bulldog sides. And does the coaching staff weigh up dropping him and bringing in Waitman and leaving in Anthony Scott, or do you keep the team going and bringing out Anthony Scott and pushing somebody else to the sub role?
Something else that I want to talk about. We're probably going to wrap up within the next 15 minutes or so, I'd say. But something else I did want to get onto, if there is anything else that people tuning in want us to get onto, let us know in the chat of wherever you are watching. We'd love to get onto it. But this pre-grand final bye this year, there's been so much talk over the years of the team winning the qualifying final, struggling in the prelim because they've had one game in 3 weeks or whatever previously, and it's going to be the same for Melbourne heading into this game because they had a week off in week 2 of the finals. They've got a week off between this prelim and the grand final. So does that give it a little advantage to the Dogs, do you reckon, or a bit of overblown hype from me?
No, I get what you're saying. I'm personally not a fan of the pre-grand final bye. I think if you're going to ever have it before the finals, but I guess it's understandable with COVID contingencies and whatnot. But I think if there's going to be an edge to a team, it will be the Bulldogs. They've obviously played the 3 straight finals and will be very happy with a bit of a rest. Obviously, guys like Bontempelli, who had that slight knee injury in the Brisbane game, and then a guy like Leighton Vandermeer, who was subbed out tonight. It'll allow them to get fresh and healthy. Stephen Martin, he played his first game since I think round 12 they mentioned, so he'll be very happy with the rest. I guess it will play a factor for Melbourne, but again, we saw last night off the week break, they came out hungry and hard. So anybody, I think Melbourne's game style is suited to not falling victim to the break, but if it's going to hurt anybody, it will be Melbourne. But I think both teams should be will rather the rest than not as we head into the grand final with the 2-week break.
I'm trying to dig up some stats here of so obviously Bulldogs came from 7th when the 2016 grand final. Has there been a team since then from outside the top 4 who's made the last?
I did see this before. The only one is the 2019 Giants.
Yes, I was thinking of them.
Yep.
So Bulldogs on a roll in Could you say they're in the form of the season for them? Yeah, because they've been so good. That really gritty win against Brisbane. Three very different wins. That kind of hard fought first half and that demolition job in the second half. That gritty win against the Lions in week 2, and then this 4-quarter dominance of a display against Port Adelaide. So 3 very different types of wins, but have they peaked at the exact right time for you? So I think that's got to be a factor when you're kind of predicting the game and tipping the game.
Yeah, exactly. I think if they do win the grand final, they'll be the first team to ever win the grand final, having lost the last 3 games of the regular season. I think I heard that the week they lost that 3rd game against Port Adelaide, which would just be a huge achievement. And as you mentioned, I think having those 3 different wins, all different game styles, different grounds, different weather environments, and everything that goes with that, I think that's going to hold them in really good stead. Melbourne, they've basically played in 2 blowouts. Obviously, the first quarter against Brisbane was close, but then the last 3 quarters was just a cakewalk, basically. Then they absolutely rolled Geelong the other night on Friday night. So it'll be interesting to see how Melbourne handle the Bulldogs midfield and the Bulldogs pressure across the ground, because they haven't really faced a team in the past couple of weeks that is going to play like the Bulldogs do. So you'd think you'd give the edge to the Bulldogs, but over the course of the season, Melbourne and the Dogs have occupied first and second spot. I think it was 16 to 23 weeks. So again, any team that's going to be able to hold good stead with the Bulldogs will be Melbourne, but it'll be interesting to see, especially in that first quarter, how Melbourne go with the pressure that the Bulldogs bring.
Yeah, definitely will be. I think we might just leave it there, unless you've got anything else to say. It's been a long night of tech issues and kind of choppy video for me, and maybe a bit of dodgy microphone for me, and me constantly looking up to the monitor, which might look a bit weird to all the viewers. But is there anything else you want to say? Our audience is picking up now, just as we're about to leave. But is there anything else you want to say before we go?
Not too much. I'm definitely looking forward to the grand final in 2 weeks, even though it is another night grand final, which last year was very much not enjoyable. But again, it's a grand final between 2 really good teams, arguably the 2 best teams over the course of the season. And I just want to give a quick shout out to 2 of my best mates, Zach and Adam, both diehard Bulldogs fans, and another close friend in Emma, another Bulldogs fan. So they'll be enjoying the celebrations tonight, even though we are all in lockdown. And hopefully for them, that they do get the win in a couple of weeks. And another quick shout out to my brother Dalton on the Twitter, helping out as the executive producer, whatever you want to call him. Yep. We'll give a quick shout out to him as well. But yeah, just really looking forward to the grand final in a couple of weeks, but definitely not looking forward to the couple of months we'll go without AFL men's footy.
Yeah, big thank you, big shout out to our chief technician there behind the laptop, Dalton Payne, and big shout out to all the Bulldogs and Demons fans. It's going to be very, very exciting and maybe a bit of a nerve-wracking fortnight leading into the big game on Saturday, the 25th of September. You didn't mention any Melbourne fans there. Not too many Demons fans going around Hoppers Crossing, or what's the deal with that?
No, I don't know too many Demons fans. So we are in the western suburbs here, so it's only fitting that I do know a few Bulldogs fans. So yeah, Melbourne fans, I don't know too many. So I'll be definitely supporting the Bulldogs on the day, but I am a neutral. So
yeah, and I just want to say something quickly. It's hard to remember a grand final with 2 such likable teams. I think the Bulldogs and the Demons are probably 2 of the most common second teams in the entire competition. So rather than a Collingwood West Coast or a Collingwood Richmond, where you don't know who to go for because you hate them both so much, it's almost you don't know who to go for because you like both the teams equally. But our audience really is picking up at this late stage of the show. So thank you very much to Dalton for working whatever kind of magic he is there out in Hoppers Crossing behind the laptop. We're hitting our absolute peak for the end of the show, which might be a sign that people really want us to see us leave and they want to see us say goodbye. So thank you very much to everyone for tuning in to this Where Do We Begin post-game wrap live. We've got one more to go for these in the season. We've really enjoyed doing this throughout the final series. So thanks so much for tuning in. Connor, thank you so much for joining me again. Dalton, I know you can hear me. Thank you so much for doing that hardcore typing that you have been for the last 54 minutes. And thanks for everyone for getting involved. Connor, anything to say before we leave it there?
No, just as I said before, really looking forward to the grand final in a couple of weeks. And thanks to Dalton, thanks to you for having me back on. Thanks to everybody watching. And if it's in the cards, maybe we can do a preview live pod sometime during next week or in grand final week. Maybe react to the Brownlow news as well.
Yep.
But I guess we'll talk about that off the live stream. And yeah, really looking forward to the grand final. So can't wait to do another live reaction after the grand final.
Yeah, you guys gained a bit of where do we begin exclusive behind the scenes conversation there. So congratulations for sticking with us and hearing that. We might have some guests for a potential grand final preview show. A few people who won't be on the piss like they have been tonight watching this game, supporters of either teams, maybe some players as well, because we have spoken to a few players of either team here at Where Do We Begin. So really looking forward to getting into some grand final coverage. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks, Connor, for joining me. Thank you, Dalton, for all your hard work. Cheers, guys. See you next time.